Hello everyone, welcome back to YK Reviews, welcome back to another Saw review, retrospective review. With this one, it's going to be the next one in the franchise, Saw 8, but it's not technically part of the continuation from Saw 7, this one's just called Jigsaw, so let's get into it here. Now, for those of you that are returning to the channel, enjoying these retrospective reviews, I appreciate all the support. Thank you so much for watching. Those of you that are new to the channel, we're doing all the retrospective reviews. I've done all the ones from Saw 1 up until Saw 7. So a playlist will be somewhere around here. You can definitely check those out. I also do weekly entertainment news videos along with like a tier ranking for Saw movies. I've done other tier rankings. So if you are new to the channel, you like that type of content, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on those types of videos here. And keep an eye out, there is going to be a spiral review. There's going to be two types of spiral reviews. One of a retrospective review, but I'm also going to be doing a collab with my good friend Jason from Jason Entertainment. We're going to be talking about the movie as well, so keep an eye out. That video is also going to be coming out in the next couple of days. But with Jigsaw, this coming out in 2017, I remember watching it in theaters. I have mixed reviews when it comes to this, but we'll dive into it straight away here, because with this movie, it sort of takes on the same formula as the other movies when you've got like the trap, the Saw games going on, along with like the other part of the movie as it's like interconnecting and cutting in and out. You're getting the characters of the story that we're going to be following here. So with this one, I want to take a unique twist and go for the characters that we're going to be following here, but also link it back to then the Saw games, because this is spoiler review. So if you haven't seen the movie, definitely check the movie out and come back to this, because we are going to be talking about spoilers. With this one, the main sticking point is that the game that they're going to be focusing on, the Saw traps and the games and stuff, we find out that it all took place years before the events of what's going on in the actual movie, which is kind of like I remember watching this for the first time, and that reveal really just made me scratch my head. Scratch that actually, let's focus on the Saw games first, because with the opening of the movie, you've got this guy getting chased by the police. He's on this rooftop, he's saying that he's got this button saying that he needs to talk to a certain police officer who does arrive at the scene, and then he's holding this little button, and when he pushes it saying that the games begin, ends up getting shot by a certain police officer, which we don't know who it is until later on in this movie, but he basically confirms that the games have begun, which then drags it to the Saw games, where you've got 5 people wearing bucket heads all chained up to the next side of the room, which has got like the saw spinning. The name of the game is that you have to make a blood sacrifice in order for the bucket to be unlocked and you can take it off. So eventually they do get around to figuring this out, all 4 people, because you've got one person with a bucket that's completely unconscious. You're not realizing that what's going on. So the 4 people, they just managed to like cut their hand or their back or whatever it was in order for them to be able to take off the bucket. But the 5th person, all we see from that shot is that 5th person eventually does wake up, but then they get the saw spinning onto them, and then we get into the next room. So we don't find out what happens to that person until the whole flashback sequence is there. But these 4 people end up surviving, so they're into the next room. We find out that they're in this barn, and we get the return of Billy the Puppet making his grand entrance. We find out that these people, the chains are still on their necks. Essentially, they have to confess to something, whereas if they don't, then the chain will just lift up and they'll get hung up. The aim of the game is because one person has to confess to something, because right now there's 3 needles in like the jar thingy hanging up above. One has got an antidote, one has got acid, and the other one, I honestly can't remember what the 3rd needle was, but the person has to confess so that they can get the antidote. And we come to find out that the person that did confess eventually was because they robbed somebody of $3.50, I think it was, in change. But because they robbed that person eventually did die because they got an asthma attack, so they didn't really save that person. So basically calling out that person for being a shitty person, but they refuse to take the needle, so the one guy ends up just stabbing all 3 needles, killing that person, saving 3 of the people in the game itself. And so that person, because we also find out as the movie is progressing throughout the movie, each person is just being shown up in present day as like a victim of Jigsaw. So like, for example, the first person, the buckethead, we see that person hung up on like a bridge in public. So like, he's just wearing boxer shorts and a bucket, and he's just hung above a bridge, so everybody's seeing him. Of course, like I mentioned in the previous movie, first reaction, taking out their phones, taking pictures of it. This person is in front of a hospital, like they are just laying their dead body in front of a hospital. So then we move on to like the next room, or the next part of, like, it's giving me that escape room vibes to it. So then we get to the next room where, so you've got these three people now. So you've got Ryan, Mitch, and Anna, I believe her name was. So these three people now into the next room. So the Ryan guy, who really did remind me of Jeff from Saw 3, kind of got the same look to him in terms of like the facial expressions and his mannerisms. He ends up going into this door where there's like a plank there, and his foot gets crushed through the wood, the wires wrapped around his legs. The other two end up going into like this silo looking thing. They get stuck in there, and you've got Grain just falling into the silo with a whole bunch of like knives and tweezers and stuff like that falling out of it, trying to avoid hitting them. And for them to be able to escape that silo, Ryan has to literally push himself to pull a lever, but because the wire is so wrapped up tightly around his leg, by doing that his leg is going to be chopped off. So eventually he manages to force himself to do it, pull the lever. The two, Mitch and Anna, able to escape the silo. However, Ryan ends up leaving with one leg, Dr. Gordon style. And so that was essentially the sacrifice for that room, because then they move on to the next room. Ryan has essentially just passed out from the pain, but we come to find out the reason that Mitch is in there is because he sold a bike that the brakes weren't working, which he knew about it. Sold it to a guy who eventually wasn't able to use the brakes on the motorbike and ends up crashing and dying. And we come to find out that person was Jigsaw, tobinbell, Johnkramer's nephew. So he's in there because of that, because he sold a dodgy bike. And so Mitch has to basically go into this big contraption that Jigsaw built with, like, I think it's like saws or something like that, just wrapped around this big contraption. And he has to literally go slowly inside in order for able to get himself that brake handle to move on to the next room. But of course Anna's trying to help. She tries to use a pole to like stop the mechanics of the machinery. It works for a slight second, but then he gets just chopped to bits basically. And so it's left with Anna and Ryan, who are like the two survivors. They end up getting drugged and going into this final room where you've got Johnkramer returning, Jigsaw himself. He's in this room giving this great speech. Just tobinbell, I've not mentioned this in any of the reviews, but tobinbell absolutely nailed it in every single performance he did in every single Saw movie. He was the perfect casting choice to be Johnkramer. And so he's just explaining everything when it comes to what's going on with himself and that kind of stuff, and just explaining everything. You come to find out that Anna was actually their neighbor, but she made her husband think that he killed their son by falling asleep on the baby. And so because of like her parenting and that kind of stuff, she's in there. I honestly forgot what Ryan did as a person. It's just, like I said, I've watched all these movies back to back, so everything's just sort of just blended together. But they're basically chained up. They're on the floor in front of each other. Johnkramer loads a shotgun and says, is it kind of implying that you kind of have to shoot the other person in order to survive? But that wasn't really the case, because he managed to have the shotgun, whereas if you do shoot, it's going to reflect back and then you'll end up going to get shot in the face, which Anna takes the bait. So she ends up trying to shoot Ryan, only for her to get shot in the face. But the keys to the locks, to the chains, were actually inside the casing. So because of that, because of her shooting the gun, she ends up destroying the keys. So they're essentially left there. She's shot in the face. Ryan's just there because he's chained up. He's got nowhere else to go. So that kind of leaves it with the two of them. So then we get back to present day, because like I mentioned, spoilers again, as we come to find out that all of that games took place 10 years ago, 10 years to the events of this movie, because now we're following these two detectives and two coroners. So you've got the detective Holloran, I believe his name was, and his partner, which I honestly can't remember the name. And then you've got the two coroners, Eleanor and Logan. So as I was mentioning, we're following these two people because every single time a victim shows up, they're investigating and they're doing the autopsy for these bodies there. We come to find out that Eleanor was really into Jigsaw. She was visiting dark webs. She has her own studio where she's got all these memorabilia for Jigsaw, including that big contraption trap that we thought was never used. So we're following these two, and they even like started suspecting like Eleanor, that coroner person, the assistant, because of her using the dark web. But also while they're doing these autopsies, while they're doing that, they actually check out blood samples and do some other detective works to find out that the blood matches John Kramer. So you're kind of led to believe that John Kramer is behind all of this, that he is still alive. He did manage to escape, which really, the first time watching this, was getting me a bit nervous to even think that they're going to have John Kramer return from the dead. But then even at one point they have this casket, John Kramer's casket, come out, only to come to find out that the person from the opening scene, the guy with like the handheld console, whatever you want to call it, he was actually inside the John Kramer's casket all along. So we actually still don't know what happened to John Kramer's body. At least I don't think they explained it, but honestly I could be wrong. They might have explained it and I just completely missed the boat. But as the movie's progressing, they sort of like start leaning towards a main detective, Holorom, as the person behind all of this, behind these murders. They even figure out that the bullet that was matching the person that shot the guy in the beginning opening scene matches Holorom, the main detective's gun. Eventually we get towards the third act, these two coroners, Elena and the other guy, again I can't remember the name of him off the top of my head right now, but they end up going to that same barn while the main detective Holoram follows them. You have this sort of little tussle going on. He ends up chasing Eleanor, who manages to escape. Then this detective gets drugged, and then him and the coroner guy wake up in that same room with Ryan and Anna were earlier on in the movie. They wake up, they've got this thingy, like this neck collar wrapped around them, which has got lasers in it, and they have to confess. So the coroner guy confesses that he actually is the one that fucked up the x-ray machine thingy for John Kramer, because we come to find out throughout the movie is that John Kramer could have been diagnosed a lot sooner, but because this guy messed up and put the labels, the name of the patients in the wrong x-ray visions, that then caused John Kramer to be diagnosed a lot later. But then the lasers sort of go towards his face, blood squirts out, and you think that he's dead. So then the other guy, this main detective guy, confesses that he's sort of like a crooked cop, lying about planting evidence, doing all that kind of just the regular crooked cop stuff that you have. But then you get this big reveal here. So the reveal would be that the main guy, the coroner, the first coroner guy, didn't actually get killed off. We come to find out that it was all fake blood and stuff like that, and he's behind all of this. So he was the buckethead from the 10 years ago sequence. So we mentioned that the person that was like unconscious and they didn't manage to escape, but we come to find out that John Kramer actually felt sorry for him, didn't want to kill him off just because he fucked up the x-ray was an honest mistake. So again, this is another apprentice from Jigsaw, from John Kramer. So he sort of set up everything in motion 10 years later. So he actually got John Kramer's blood, which is the reason why they matched the blood sample with John Kramer. So you get this big reveal, you get this flashback. We also come to find out that the first guy from the opening scene, the one that did get shot, he actually shot him because apparently he killed his wife all those many years ago. He actually takes off a blanket and we see the rotten corpses of Ryan and Anna from the earlier games. The lasers actually start cutting the main detective's guy's face off because he wasn't going to forgive him for everything that took place. So essentially this guy was another John Kramer's apprentice, and that sort of like ended the movie with that reveal. Now when it comes to the movie itself, to be completely honest with you, like, it may not have been one of the best Saw movies, but the traps in the games and even the characters included in these games were a lot more entertaining than the last couple of ones. I really found myself enjoying it. Like, I wasn't having fun at first with the characters, but then the more you're like progressing with it, the more you enjoy the characters, the more you're like rooting for them. However, the reveal of it taking place 10 years ago just kind of was like a setup that wasn't really earned with all of this. And then because you're sort of like jumping around timelines now, so you've got all of this event taking place, you're following these characters to come to find out that none of them survived, to then 10 years later you're following these characters. So all in all, it just felt like a very messy, structured movie, which isn't ideal for me. And then even like the reveal itself, you kind of see it coming because at the end of the day you only got 4 people to pick from: the main detective, or the main coroner guy, or Elena the assistant, or the detective's partner. The detective partner wasn't enough in the movie for them to be rolled out, so you're sort of left with the 3. them leaning towards Eleanor was sort of just kind of like a misdirect, which you can kind of sense it. So you're kind of left with the last two, and they're the last two that was in the final scene. So all in all, it was a good movie. It was an okay movie. It didn't really feel like a proper Saw movie other than the traps. But then again, like I mentioned, the traps were from back in time, which that for me pulled me out of it. But I still had fun with the movie in itself, not like some of the other movies in the franchise, one in particular which we'll be talking about. But those are my thoughts about this movie here. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Spiral next, along with Saw X coming out later on this week, and the tier ranking for the Saw movies, which I'm honestly really pumped about. So definitely subscribe so you're not missing out on that. And also let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you have seen the Jigsaw movie, what your thoughts are about it, let me know in the comment section down below. But that about wraps it up for this review here. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for listening. This is YK Reviews.